Welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast, where trauma survivors become healthy thrivers. Each month, we'll feature a theme in the trauma recovery and empowerment field. To promote your recovery, healing, and learning how to build dreams, here's your host, Karen Robinson, transformational coach and therapist.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast. Today, my guest is Miss Jenna Ashlyn. Miss Ashlyn is an author, and she has written a book that she's going to talk to us about today. And I'm going to read her bio off a little bit. She's a volunteer for Southern Ohio's Survivor Advocacy Outreach Program. She provides support and services to victims of abuse. She loves animals and spends all of her extra time cuddling with her Cocker Spaniel. She studied creative writing at 2 universities and worked for a campus literary magazine. Her writing has been in a few different magazines that she can share, and she's won writing awards. Ooh, that's exciting. So we get to hear about that as well. And so she's going to share about her book today, and she's also going to share how she can be of service to anyone wanting her help in the audience. So Jen, I know that was a kind of a rough bio. I'm so sorry. It's been an interesting day. It's been back to back. So you're welcome to fill in any gaps that I missed. We're just happy to have you.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I think you did just fine. Don't worry too much about it. They're going to get to know me as we talk anyway. So
This is true. Yeah. So is the book the most exciting thing going on in your life right now?
No, it's not actually.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that.
I mean, it's pretty exciting, and it's like a really big part of my life right now, but no, I'm getting married in June. So
I see. Yeah, that might
finally
be.
I finally found my Prince Charming. So
Ooh, I'm glad that you are putting him ahead of the book, because I'm not sure how else he would interpret that since it's a lifelong, commitment.
They're kind of connected anyway, but
Okay. Tell us more about that.
Okay, so like I'm talking in the book and some of the advertisements and stuff for it. Whenever it's described in the back, it says it is a dark modern fairy tale that follows the life of Sheila, a naive romantic living in poverty. And then it kind of goes on. So I don't want to just sit there and read the whole thing to you because,
Show us the cover for the
Yeah.
YouTubers and tell us the name of it for podcasters.
It's called Sheila's Men by Jenna Ashlyn. And it is a fictionalized account of my journey through domestic violence and sexual assault. And like I said before, it is a dark fairy tale. And, if you're going to go through years of abuse, it's kind of nice to heal from it, move on, and find your Prince Charming. So,
yeah. So what about that journey? What pieces of it are you going to be willing to share with us today?
Well, I'm going to say that it has a, 2/3 of the book is pretty miserable. I mean, for me to go through, but maybe it's not all bad. So I'll just say that. But, after it's one of those things where a lot of survivors don't really realize how beautiful life can be on the other side, because you really do love more, you live more, you appreciate more, and life is beautiful, and I'm living my fairy tale, and I want other people to be able to live that too.
Okay. So let's start with some of the dark time, because that's what people can generally connect with. I think a lot of people won't be able to connect with fairy tale right now unless they're on the other side of things. So let's, meet where clients may be at this point, or people in the audience. Tell us a little bit about your childhood. Did you have a abuse in your childhood as well?
I did. It started happening whenever I was about the age of 4 and lasted until I was about 11. And I was kind of old enough to understand what was going on and and start telling and start talking to my parents and everything. And that's when things kind of stopped. And a lot of the times whenever you have early childhood abuse, it kind of becomes a part of you. It messes with your way of thinking and your brain
Mhm.
development. And, because of that, you tend to draw a lot of negativity your way, a lot of, and you don't really realize you're doing it. It's just kind of one of those things that happens. And that becomes your normal. And so I went through, a lot of that through childhood, and that did continue into adulthood as well.
Yeah, that happens more often than most people realize. It's not often that it's a young woman who had a picture perfect childhood then marries someone who's abusive. It's more likely to be the other way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, what happened as I got older, I ended up, I had a lot of trouble with relationships. I mean, I have way too many to even count, and it's sad and it's embarrassing because I've been married a few times. And I had actually became a widow whenever I was 30 years old. My husband died of a heart attack, and that's kind of where the journey through the books that I have written began. There's actually two of them. Within the Gray is kind of what I wished would have happened. I sat down and wrote it through emails to myself while I was working and whenever I had a chance at night. But I wrote Within the Gray then, and it was, you know, the experience of losing my husband and then what I wanted to happen, what I needed to happen, because what I should have done was I should have went to a crisis center. I should have found a way to get support, but I didn't because I was afraid. I was very naive in thinking that I could lose my children because I was having mental health problems getting through that. And um, a lot of guys and stuff seen me as this suddenly single young widow, and they started coming out of the woodwork and showing up at my apartment, and guys started hitting on me at my husband's funeral. And so I started looking for friends and, just like some guy to be around, just to kind of, filter some of that back and kind of push that back. And that's not what I should have done. I should have been able to kind of stand up for myself. But going through that, my brain was not functioning well, and I wasn't able to really make the right decisions. And that's how I ended up in an abusive relationship because this guy showed up. I made friends. He made fairly decent conversations. He seemed concerned about me. And then, I kept telling him I'm not ready for a relationship, and he just kept pushing the issue until eventually I gave in. And that kind of pattern continued for 9 years. Here is for the YouTubers out there. This is the first book. This is Within the Gray. This is what I should have done. There's some trauma stuff in here. There's some trigger warning,
Mhm.
but the Gray is like my psychological journey. It's kind of like what's happening in your mind, and it's communicated through dreams and visions. But this is how it should have went. And it's called Within the Gray. How that's what should have happened, and what I wish would have happened. What really happened though is recorded in Sheila's Men.
Okay. Yeah, I hope at some point, I'm guessing it's probably been your part of your healing journey that you were able to recognize that predators look for vulnerable women, and losing a spouse is probably a vulnerable time and an opportunity for them. And I hope you've been able to give yourself some grace and, some self-forgiveness. You're going through a
Yeah.
lot.
As I was writing the book, I started seeing my own pattern. I mean, I started journaling before that, long before that. But between journaling and then I would just kind of pour my heart out in the journal. And then I would go back to it and I would start to see patterns, and I would start to kind of research, and I'd see my way of thinking and, started to ask myself why was I feeling this way? And then I would ask myself why again and again and again until I really got to the root of it and started, and over and over and over again. It was very intense because I did it so quickly and so intently, like I did nothing else. That was my main focus. It was like, I am not going to go through this anymore. I am not going to keep living this life. And so I journaled and I researched and I did therapy. And sometimes I had to do, texting therapy because I was at work and there was a program at work that was available to me that I could use a text line and phone calls. And that's what I did, was journaling and doing the therapy and talking to them. And then whenever I started writing the book, I started seeing even more patterns, and I started to recognize things. And then I would take that information and I'd be like, okay, so this is what I'm seeing. And there was a lot of things where I got to see, hey, where I messed up, because you really do teach people how to treat you. But if you don't know that you're doing that and you're just trying to be a nice person, you tend to follow these own patterns that you set up in yourself without realizing it, that can kind of lead people down the wrong path. And whenever you're vulnerable and you haven't really healed these things, it's very easy for a predator to get in. And through the writing of the book, it was really another part of my healing process until it wasn't. So about halfway through, as I started to realize, all of these patterns, and I started to learn and grow through all of the counseling and all of the journaling and all of the really digging deep and doing the work, I realized that it wasn't just about me anymore. And it really became a much greater mission because I could look back and see how much my life had changed just because I had worked so hard at it, because I really worked to forgive myself, to heal from within. And I want that for other people. Um, Whenever I left my abuser, he actually ended up with he ended up with another target, another source, because he was very narcissistic. And I kind of kept the lines of communication open with her. And a couple years after she had been with him, she contacted me again and she was like, "Hey, he's doing this. He's talking to prostitutes. He cheated on me. He's talking to, I've seen messages where he's talking to men and women about things that he wants to do to them. And we just had a baby. I don't want to live like this." He's you know, pushed me up against the refrigerator whenever I talked to him about it and told me he hadn't done anything wrong, even though I'd seen the messages. And, she started telling me some of the things that he'd been doing. And so together I kind of worked with her and talked with her and gave her that place to really communicate how she was feeling. And she was able to escape that relationship and move on with her life, and her son are safe. And that was so, so rewarding,
Mm,
that, to know that my story and the experiences and the healing process that I went through could help others, that I actually went through the process of getting training in the state of Ohio for advocacy. So I'm now on the crisis line I'm on a rape crisis line for the Survivor Advocacy Outreach Program, normally about once a week, although I'm not doing it in January because I am launching the book and I don't really have a lot of time. But so I am doing that now as well. But as I was writing the book, it became about so much more, because so many women are suicidal and they really don't see a way out, and they go through so much difficulty in healing, and there's not a lot of stories of hope out there. And that's what I
mm,
want my story to be, is that
mm.
you can heal.
Beautiful. Yeah. Did you yourself have a suicide attempt?
No, they were mostly just suicidal ideation. I had a plan, but I never went through with it. I think whenever I was about there, um, because I used to drive back and forth to work, which was like an hour and a half away, and I would stare at the guardrails because I worked in West Virginia and there was some serious action there. And I kept thinking, if I just hit the gas really hard and swerve the wheel, then I'm going to go over that guardrail and over that cliff and it'll be over. And I thought about that a lot. And eventually that was kind of my breaking point and my low point. And then I kind of started fighting back. I started figuring out, how am I going to get out? Because I have 3 kids, and how was I going to keep all of us safe?
Yeah.
And that's when I started really fighting back.
Yeah. I'm so glad. Yeah. I don't know if you knew this about me, but before becoming a coach, I've been a therapist for almost 24 years. It'll be 24 years in May. And a lot of my trauma survivors have had attempts or seriously considered it, just because when trauma impacts every area of your life, it's hard to find that hope, you
It
know?
really is. It really, really is.
Yeah,
And it's hard to heal because, I mean, you don't know how. Like,
exactly.
whenever, especially whenever you're going through that, you don't know how. You don't know how to escape. You can't see the light because you're so surrounded by darkness that there is no light. And sometimes you have to find that light within yourself, and that's one of the hardest things in the world to do.
So how did you do that? Maybe just give us a little nugget. Or how would you
Um,
recommend someone find hope?
I mean, you have to really look within yourself and think about, who you really are. You know, think, take the time. It could just be a moment, you know, find that song on the radio, listen to who you really are, that part of you that's fighting against it. And remember that it's one thing that people don't understand about suicide is that you're not wanting to die. You want to end the life that you're living.
The pain, yeah.
You want it to stop.
Mhm.
You want a different life than the one that you have, and that's the only way that you're seeing to move past it. And you start remembering who you are as a child, because that child's still in there,
Mhm.
and you just kind of have to take it day by day. Well, I want to spend more time with my kids before I do this. I want to see my mother one last time. Those little things, until you can, maybe write a list of things that you really want to do, even if they seem really crazy. Like, hey, I want to go climb Mount Everest, or I want to go to Italy, or, whatever it might be. And then as you start making that list, you kind of think about all the little things that you're not allowed to do, because there's always something like that you're not able to do, or you're just not allowed to do. Like, I wonder what it's like to get a massage, or to get my nails done without having to worry about how quickly I get home, or, even those little things can start to give you a little bit of hope, can start to remind you who you were before the abuse.
Yeah, beautiful. So other than your own books, have there been books along your path that you would recommend as because they were part of your healing journey?
Not really, because honestly, I didn't have time to read. It was music for me, because it was back and forth to work every day. I was gone 60, 70 hours a week.
Really long commutes.
Yes.
Yeah. What were you doing for work?
I was at that time I was the assistant manager at a jewelry store, and I was working on. I had to travel for a while to get additional training and everything to be able to take over the store that was actually in my area.
Mhm. So you were a survivor and a working mom with this
Yes, very much
really,
so.
yeah.
A
How
very
did
demanding career.
how did you cope? How did you manage it?
I don't want to say I don't know, but I think the writing
Mm.
helped, because at that time I was writing within the gray. So whenever I'd get a break at work, I'd pull out a tablet, or I'd pull out my phone, and I'd read what I'd written, or or I'd start writing about, what I wanted my life to be like. Every day I had interesting people coming into the store, because we were at a mall that was connected to a civic center. And so they were having conferences and stuff all the time. So there was no end to interesting people. So I think, seeing that there are other types of people out there, that were different than what I was experiencing was very uplifting too.
Hmm.
It engaged a little bit of curiosity, but I'd say a lot of the writing did. And kind of journaling and stuff, and that started to kind of very slowly revive me, but I was exhausted. It was really hard.
Mm-hmm. It sounds pretty challenging. I really love, like, how a lot of people say they don't have time because we have very busy lives. I love that you took the little nuggets of time you had and worked on your dream. That's pretty cool.
Thank you. I mean, that's at that time, that's really all I had, but like I wasn't really talking about it or telling anyone. I remember a guy that I worked with at the time, he was a writer too, and he was so proud because he wrote he wrote a press release and a little story, and it ended up in the newspaper. And like I told him at one point that I was a writer and I'd taken some classes in college and stuff, and he like completely ignored me, and I'm like, huh.
It's things like that, though, that even though they're pretty unpleasant, it does, was it stoke a little fire in
Yeah,
us. Yeah.
yeah, because I was just being very casual about it, and I'm like, I always wanted to write books, so I'm like, maybe I actually will, maybe this little thing that I'm working on in emails will be something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
You showed him.
yeah, I did. He's actually in Sheila's Men, so
Is that going to be in your press release?
yeah, I might do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your favorite inspirational tool nowadays? Is it still journaling and writing, or is there other tool? You mentioned music. So if there's certain songs or types of music that really helped in your recovery, share.
I love all types of music. I actually have playlists for just about everything. I have a playlist for both of the books, and a lot of the times I kind of go back and I remind myself, where I was. And then when I have bad days, have to kind of like, it takes a little bit whenever I go through like a really depressed day and I'm like, wait, this is crazy. And I start reminding myself of the good things that I'm doing. And nobody likes to brag about themselves, but like you can brag to yourself about yourself,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
be like, and not feel selfish about that. Be okay with that. But I listen to a lot of music. I take a lot of bubble baths, and I paint as well.
Ooh, very nice. Okay. And will people be able to see like your playlist or your paintings or anything? Do you have a website that people can go to?
They can, normally I post stuff like that on my Facebook author account. It's
Mhm.
facebook.com/author Jenna Ashlyn. You can Google author Jenna Ashlyn and it'll pull up too there. So if you can't like remember all that, you can Google me. I have a presence there. I'll show up, which is great. Just
Mhm.
the weirdest thing. But it's weird when you start showing up in Google searches, but you can find me pretty easily there, and I do generally tend to link that playlist. I don't know like what the copyright laws or anything like that are, so I don't want to mention any specific songs.
Oh, I appreciate that because I had forgotten about those silly little rules that exist. If you want to email me uh, any of your playlists for listeners, I can put it in the show notes, and I'll have your websites and the names of your books in my show notes. That way, because it might inspire other people as well.
My fiance is actually one of our connecting points. He's also very creative too, and he's in the master's program for clinical psychology.
Mhm.
So
Wow.
that's been very helpful.
Mhm.
I got him the DSM-5 for Christmas. You'll
Oh my
probably edit this
gosh.
out.
No,
You'll
no,
probably,
no. I think that's important information. The DSM-5, for listeners, that's the Bible for therapists and psychotherapists. It's all the diagnostic codes that we need for insurance billing.
yes,
Yeah.
it's amazing. It's an amazing book. They use it a lot. So I was very excited to be able to invest in him and get him his copy. He wants to have his leather bound and everything. But he and I are both very creative, and he's a musician. So I might send along a link to his playlist, to his videos and stuff. He has a little itty bitty baby presence on YouTube. But
Mhm.
whenever I get really, really frustrated, I actually listen to his stuff. So, because
Aw.
it's orchestrated without being boring.
And I imagine like listening to it reminds you of him if he's not with you. And so that can be comforting.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very true. And, you know, if he's studying a lot, I don't necessarily get to spend a whole lot of time with him because it can be very demanding. And then, as you mentioned in my bio, I have a Cocker Spaniel.
Oh, yeah.
Cockers are very great therapeutic emotional support dogs. He's not trained or anything, but he's my little companion whenever I'm alone. So
Awesome. So
I
as
have
we
I
go
have
ahead.
a lot of coping mechanisms
Yeah,
apparently.
I
I
hear.
just
Yeah. Sometimes we just need to like we don't think that in those terms. And so until, put in a situation like, oh, what are my coping skills? Because it's really easy to find maladaptive or negative coping skills, right? Like it's when we spend too much or eat too much or have a little too much wine. And so we have to dig a little deeper for the healthier coping skills. So I'm glad that you have them. And
yes,
just, yeah.
my
And
I'd say, having animals, and then like I never really thought about how many coping skills I have until I was just listing all of those off. I write, I paint, I listen to music. Sometimes I play piano. I cuddle with my dog and I take a lot of bubble baths. That sounds insane.
and probably
But
cuddle with your sweetie too.
of course, yes, he's very therapeutic. Just being around him. Sometimes we're just sitting at the kitchen table doing our own thing, and just being around him is very peaceful because I know he's safe.
Ooh.
It took years to know that.
Yeah. So how,
Years.
okay, we got to put that nugget in there. Are there
Yeah.
signs when someone is safe? Like, how can you explain safety to anyone listening that doesn't know?
Because they consistently, over a long period of time, are more concerned about you than they are about themselves. That's whenever you know someone really loves you. And as far as safety is concerned, whenever you can talk to them about something that's bothering you, even if it seems like something very, very trivial to other people, if something triggers you or bothers you and they're okay with it, and they were open to having that discussion and hearing how you feel and validating your feelings, even if they disagree with you, recognizing that, your feelings are valid and that you're allowed to have them, and trying to understand why you feel that way, and being able to have an open discussion without getting upset, without getting angry. That's a really good sign. And just because somebody's good for a week doesn't mean they're going to be good forever. It does take a long time, so don't beat yourself up about it. You need to find that person that is open and willing to talk things through with you.
Okay. Thank you. So as we wrap up, any final words of wisdom for our audience? You've given several.
Well, thank you. I try to be very down to earth about it. So there's a lot of triggers in Sheila's men, so I just want to talk about it as a tool for just a moment. Um, and I've kind of ran this past him, and he feels that it's valid. My book, Sheila's Men, can be used as a tool. It can also be very triggering. So my recommendation is to find something. First of all, get a journal. You can only go to therapy ever so often. And if you have more tools to work with, then your therapist has more that they can help you with. And using a journal is a good way to do that. So if you're going along your day or you're reading the book and something triggers you and you start thinking and you have to stop and there's some emotions happening, write it down. Give yourself permission to feel. Know that your feelings are valid and there's nothing wrong with how you feel. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to feel those feelings. It's okay to be mad. It's okay to mourn who you thought you were or what you thought that relationship was. Write those things down. Allow yourself those feelings. whenever you're triggered by something, feel that. Ask yourself why. Write it down. And then whenever, that trigger is done and you're feeling a little bit better, hours later or days later, go back to it and start trying to understand yourself. Take that tool and take that resource to your therapist and have a deeper discussion, because, sometimes whenever we have our therapy appointments, we're feeling great that day, and that, having these resources can really help you to dive deeper than you have before and get in there and kind of heal those wounds and that way of thinking. It can go really great with different types of therapy.
Well, Jenna, we really appreciate you being here today to inspire our audience. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening in today. Please join us next week, same day and time. Also, I would love for you to check out my website, healthrivedream.com.